On March 2024, the Kings traveled to Minnesota to face the top-seeded Timberwolves. In the 58 games leading up to this matchup, the Kings had struggled defensively, ranking 20th in the league by allowing just under 118 points per 100 possessions. It was clear that their identity was rooted in offense. However, they faced a significant challenge against the league's #1 defense, especially without their leading scorer, De'Aaron Fox, who was sidelined with a knee injury. Stepping into the starting lineup for just the 4th time in his NBA career, Keon Ellis made an impact defensively, recording 4 steals and a block in just 18 minutes of play. Malik Monk shouldered the scoring burden, pouring in 39 points and ultimately leading the Kings to a thrilling overtime victory, 7.5. A game later, De'Aaron Fox returned for a home matchup against the struggling Bulls, but the Kings surprisingly lost by 4 points. What stood out to me, though, was that Keon Ellis didn't play a single minute. It seems Coach Mike Brown recognized this oversight, as in the next game against the Lakers, Ellis came off the bench for 14 minutes, finishing with a +17 in a 10-point win. The following night, in a matchup against the Spurs, Ellis saw a slight increase in playing time, logging 17 minutes and registering a +15 in a narrow 2-point victory. Then, just a few days later on March 12th, Keegan Murray sat out with a tweaked ankle, giving Ellis another opportunity to start. He played 27 minutes, recorded 3 steals, and delivered near-flawless defense on Damian Lillard as the Kings demolished the Bucks by 35 points. The next night, with Kevin Huerter sidelined, Ellis earned his 3rd start of the month. This time it was D'Angelo Russell, who found himself under Ellis's intense defensive pressure. In that game, D'Angelo Russell managed just 6 points on 2 of 9 shooting, as the Kings secured a 13-point win. Clearly, momentum was building, and by this point, Keon Ellis had proven himself as a reliable part of the rotation. On March 18th, when Kevin Huerter unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury, Ellis stepped in as a full-time starter for the remainder of the season. His impact was impossible to ignore. Ellis had several standout performances, including an electrifying game against the Thunder, where he hit 8 3-pointers and scored 26 points on their home court. In the play-in tournament, he played such exceptional defense that he rendered Steph Curry nearly invisible, recording 3 steals and 3 blocks in the process. It wasn't just moments of brilliance like these. Ellis's impact was consistent and tangible at every level. Remember when I mentioned the Kings had the 20th ranked defense before their March 1st game in Minnesota? Over the final 24 games of the season, the difference was undeniable. By the end of the season, the Kings had transformed into a defensive powerhouse, ranking 4th in the NBA and allowing fewer than 111 points per 100 possessions. Keon Ellis played a pivotal role in this turnaround. Despite his defensive dominance, the team didn't miss a beat offensively with him in the lineup. He exemplified the ideal complementary player, someone with enough offensive skills to maintain or even add value while being a truly elite defender. When the Kings added DeMar DeRozan in the offseason, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that Ellis would solidify his place as the 5th starter, perfectly rounding out the lineup. However, in this season's opener against the Timberwolves, it became evident this wasn't the case. Kevin Huerter returned from injury and reclaimed his spot in the starting lineup, while Ellis played just 11 minutes off the bench. It wasn't until the 5th game of the season that Keon Ellis got his first start, but it turned out to be a one-off. After starting 3 games to close out November, Ellis didn't start a single game throughout December. In fact, he was nearly phased out of the rotation, with games where he logged just 14, 13, 5, and even 2 minutes of playing time. This decline in his role coincided with the Kings' struggles. They went 5-8 in December and by the 27th had fallen to 12th in the Western Conference with a 13-18 record. That night, a report emerged stating the Kings were parting ways with head coach Mike Brown. At that point, the team appeared to be teetering on the edge of collapse. While it's hard to say definitively whether Brown deliberately limited Ellis's playing time, the change in his role after the coaching switch was undeniable. In the 7 games following Brown's departure, Ellis started in 5 of them and averaged nearly 30 minutes per game. Right on cue, the Kings went 6-1 during that stretch, capped off by a double overtime thriller where Ellis completely took over the game. Defensively, Keon Ellis continues to prove in his 2nd season that great things happen when he's on the floor. This raises the question, what exactly is he doing to impact the game at such a high level? For the Kings, his role is straightforward. Shut down the opposing team's best backcourt creator. Against the Warriors, this means chasing Steph Curry through a maze of off-ball screens. Against the Hawks, it involves taking on Trae Young at the point of attack, doing everything possible to keep the ball out of the paint. And against the Timberwolves, it means staying disciplined in isolation against Anthony Edwards, using his quickness to prevent Edwards from gaining an edge on a drive. However, when offenses run through bigger wings or more physical creators, those matchups aren't typically Ellis's primary responsibility. Instead, his impact is concentrated where his skill set is most effective, disrupting the flow of smaller, dynamic guards. Keon Ellis tends to match up best against smaller, quicker players, and there's a good reason for that. He's one of the lightest players in the NBA, with a listed weight of 175 pounds. His slender frame can make him susceptible to being overpowered, particularly by stronger players. For instance, he struggled against Devin Booker, who repeatedly took him to the mid-post and outmuscled him. That's not to say Ellis can't defend in those areas, though. Anthony Edwards also tried to exploit mid-post spots against him, but Ellis held his ground by using active hands and strong footwork. While he may not have significant physical strength, his exceptionally long arms and sharp instincts allow him to compensate. When Ellis relentlessly attacks the ball, any slight mistake by the offensive player can quickly turn into a steal or disruption. This is why players with refined post games like Booker pose a bigger challenge. Against less polished wings, Ellis's quickness, length, and relentless ball pressure make it much harder for opponents to establish a rhythm. In fact, Keon Ellis does a great job preventing opponents from getting to their spots near the basket, even when they try to back him down. His combination of length and quick hands doesn't just make an impact in the post, it's a problem for opponents all over the floor. Take, for example, how his defensive instincts dominated this possession. Tyler Hero attempts to reject a screen with a crossover, but Ellis's extended arm forces him to pull back and attack left. And that doesn't lead to anything, so Hero resets the two-man game up top. Ellis stays glued to him, swiping at the ball and pursuing relentlessly until he finally forces a steal. Even against elite ball handlers like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who rarely lose possession, Ellis makes his presence felt. His relentless pressure is a big reason why he's currently 5th in the NBA, averaging nearly 2.5 steals per 75 possessions. As impressive as his quick hands are, Ellis's true superpower on defense is his world-class lateral quickness. His skinny frame gives him exceptional agility, making it nearly impossible for offensive players to beat him off the dribble. Even a player as explosive as Tyrese Maxey, known for his straight-line speed, struggles to get past Ellis, who stays glued to his hip. Ellis's slim frame does come with its drawbacks. While he's excellent at cutting off drives, some players can use their physicality to bump him off his spot and create separation. However, he has two significant assets that help mitigate this weakness. First, his recovery speed is exceptional. Even when bumped out of position, Ellis can quickly get back to the ball and contest the shot effectively. Second, his lightning-fast hands remain a constant threat. If he's knocked off balance or the ball's exposed for even a moment, he can swipe down and force a turnover. Against most perimeter-oriented wings, Ellis is an absolute menace, a nightmare to deal with in isolation. And when his man tries to shake him off with a screen, it's almost futile. Ellis has a remarkable ability to phase through screens as if they're not even there, sticking to his matchup like superglue. This is yet another advantage of his slender frame. He can slip over the top of screens without making significant contact, maintaining his defensive presence at all times. Keon Ellis's agility allows him to stick with drives all the way to the rim, often chasing ball handlers either from behind or staying glued to their hip, where he can effectively control their every move. One technique he frequently uses in this position is raising his long arm to limit passing angles. By doing so, he not only makes it difficult to get the ball to the roller, but also completely shuts off passes to the corner. This is a high line for me. This forces many ball handlers into a score-only mode. For instance, in one play, Kyle Lowry attempts to get the ball to Bam Adebayo, but Ellis cuts off the angle entirely, leaving Lowry with nowhere to go and forcing him into a poor shot. Beyond disrupting passing lanes, Ellis's length and impeccable timing also make it difficult for players to score in these situations. Ellis's dismantling routes have resulted in the deaths of 3 players and the losing of 4 players' lives. A great example of this is a play against Austin Reeves. Ellis chases him over the top of a screen and gets momentarily stuck on his backside. However, because of his The threat Keon Ellis provides in rear pursuit forces offensive players to adjust their shots. In one play against Austin Reeves, after Ellis stays on his hip, Reeves is forced into an off-balanced, awkward shot. On the very next possession, Reeves tries to set up a pick and roll again, but this time Ellis gets clipped by the screen. Despite the contact, Reeves thinks he has enough space for a floater, only for Ellis to reject the shot. It's worth noting that in addition to his steals, Ellis is averaging nearly 1.2 blocks per 75 possessions, which ranks second among guards, just behind Derek White. So, when he's guarding at the point of attack, Ellis is one of those players who can disrupt the opposing offense. He forces ball handlers to turn the corner quickly and rush into the paint. This is especially true when he's chasing players over the top of screens, which is one of his signature defensive moves. Keon Ellis's approach to going under screens isn't anything out of the ordinary for an on-ball defender against weaker shooters, but his quickness allows him to do it more effectively than most. One of the risks of going under a screen is that some players will turn the corner to attack the open space or try to reject the screen. However, Ellis's lateral quickness is so exceptional that he rarely gives up those angles. And in the rare instances when he does get beat, he quickly recovers by playing from the hip, regaining control of the possession and dictating the outcome. His ability to excel both going under and over screens has transformed him into an elite off-ball chaser. Take this play, for example, where he stays with Anthony Edwards as he uses a screen. Ellis's pursuit is relentless, and his quickness keeps him in the play, showing just how effective he is at sticking with his assignment. Keon Ellis excels at staying glued to his matchup, even when facing the same screen twice. His ability to stick to the hip of his assignment is evident, and he often finishes plays with a blocked mid-range jumper. Against offenses that rely on movement shooters, Ellis becomes their go-to defender as a chaser. He does an exceptional job staying attached around screens, making it more difficult for the offense to get clean looks. A great example of this is a play against James Harden, where Ellis chases him over the top of a handoff. When Harden tries to use his strength to box him out, Ellis quickly recovers, gets back in front, and swipes at the ball. As I mentioned, Ellis spends most of his time defending the opposing team's primary guards. Whether that means defending a pick-and-roll ball handler, an isolation player, or a movement shooter, the key to his success is his versatility and ability to disrupt at every level. The Kings rely on Keon Ellis to do as much as possible to disrupt the opposing team's primary sources of offense. However, there are times when he finds himself switched off the ball or in a position to help, and his activity in those situations really stands out. With his length and quick hands, he excels at disrupting passing lanes, but what I appreciate most is his awareness and timing when rotating to pick up drives or tag the roller. His speed in recovering to the perimeter for closeouts is equally impressive. Ellis may not be a game-changing team defender who offers significant rim protection. Defense is certainly not a weakness for him. When you look at the totality of his defensive contributions, whether in perimeter isolations, pick-and-roll situations, or off-screen scenarios, it's clear how much of an impact he has on the team's overall defense. Keon Ellis is among the very best in the league when switched off the ball. He remains active, engaged, and aware as a team defender. That said, his lack of true versatility as a man defender and his limited impact in the paint prevent him from being a legitimate candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. However, within his role for the Kings, he could certainly earn some all-defensive recognition, provided he continues to play significant minutes. As for the offense, I mentioned earlier that it's mostly about treading water. Ellis isn't the type of player who will elevate the team's scoring, but he also won't be a liability on that end. His offensive contributions are primarily spent doing one of two things: capitalizing on the turnovers he forces and helping his team get stops. This often leads to him running in transition, where he can make an impact without needing to dominate the ball. And in the half court, Keon Ellis's role is simple: spot up and make the right decisions off the catch. More often than not, that decision is to shoot the ball, and we now have a fairly large sample size, showing that he's a legitimately capable and reliable shooter. Since entering the league, he's attempted 303 three-pointers and has made an impressive 42% of them. While there isn't much versatility to his shooting, and many of his attempts come from open looks, he's consistently proven that he's not a player defenses can afford to ignore. For the Kings, this is exactly what they need. They already have one of the best playmaking bigs in the league in Domantas Sabonis, not one but two all-star caliber offensive cornerstones in De'Aaron Fox and DeMar DeRozan, and another near-elite playmaker in Malik Monk. Ellis's ability to space the floor and knock down open shots fits perfectly into their offensive scheme. So, the creation aspect is pretty much covered for the Kings, and as long as you can spot up and hit shots, you'll have a place in their offense. That's where Keon Ellis shines. Moving forward, I'd be shocked if he doesn't carve out a role as either a full-time starter or a 30-minute per game contributor off the bench. Just look at the statistical profile he's starting to build. Excluding garbage time over the last 2 seasons, the Kings have played over 1,500 minutes with Ellis on the floor, and during that time, they've posted a net rating of plus 7.2. In contrast, when he's not on the floor and the Kings have played over 3,600 minutes without him, that net rating drops all the way to plus 0.9. Pro Itone, quality outside shooter who can completely change games defensively, is exactly the type of player every team needs. Any contender would be thrilled at the prospect of acquiring Keon Ellis, and as long as the Kings have him, they should continue to utilize him to the fullest. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on my post notifications so you don't miss out on future content. For more in-depth analysis, check out the Hoop Venue profiles with links available in the description. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Ellis, so feel free to leave a comment below. As always, I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.